Hi, Teri here from Stamping Magic. Welcome back to my channel. Today's project is a large 6-inch square card. I've used the Honey Bee stamp set together with the coordinating detailed bee dies and some of the Golden Honey Designer Series paper. Now this paper is one of the free items you can select during our current celebration promotion when you make a qualifying purchase. Full details on this promotion are on my blog. Now this video will show you how to make the bee wreath and also how to extend the So Sweetly dies, which are rectangles, and make them into squares. So let's get started. These are all the measurements you need for all the elements required to create this project. So if you are interested in reproducing it, you can take a screenshot and refer to it later. This is the honeybee stamp set, and today I'm using the small bee, the hello sentiment and the 2 flowers. I have some scrap pieces of Whisper White card here and also my Whisper White panel for inside the card. I'm going to stamp these using Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I'm going to start by stamping each flower at the top of the Whisper White panel. I'm also going to stamp each of the flowers twice on one of the scrap pieces of Whisper White. I'm using Coastal Cabana ink for the hello sentiment. Now because my ink pad is nice and juicy, I'll be able to heat emboss with this ink. So I've got my clear embossing powder ready. You have to be quite quick because the ink dries so quickly. So I'm just going to cover that sentiment with clear embossing powder, and then I can melt it with my heat tool. I've gone ahead and die cut the sentiment, and I used one of the dies from the stitched label set, this 1-inch stitched circle. If you haven't got this die set, you could use a 1-inch circle punch or any 1-inch circle die. To create the black scallop circle, I used the 1 1/8 of an inch scalloped circle punch. And to create the Coastal Cabana mat to go underneath it, I use one of the painted label dies. I'm using the Stampin' Blends alcohol markers in Daffodil Delight to colour the flower heads. I'm starting with the light Daffodil Delight, and then I'm just adding a little of the dark. I'm not blending at all, these images are far too small. And then these will all be die cut using some of the detailed bee dies. This bee circle came about completely by accident, really. It was a pure fluke that when I was playing with it was the 5-inch stencil at the time, and this is the panel I created, that I happened to place my first bee image in just the right position to create this perfect circle of bees with all their wings touching. Now when I say perfect, it's not actually perfect. You would never get it perfect because the bee's body is not actually symmetrical, the 2 halves of it. If you looked very closely, you would see on one side the bee's wings are touching, and on the other side they are overlapping slightly. But it's as close to perfect as it needs to be. Now my problem was that I would want to recreate this circle at a later date, so I had to devise a way that I could do this and I could teach you how to do it as well, in case you wanted to recreate this card. So I've come up with a way, and hopefully you don't find it too confusing or complicated. Now this is my wreath builder template. Although I used a 5-inch one for my original circle of bees, I'm using a 4-inch one this time, so it can be done on either. If you're interested in seeing how I created my wreath building templates, I'll leave a link at the top right of the screen to a video showing you how I did this. To start with, you want to cut out a 4-inch square of copy paper or computer paper. 4 inches is 10.15 centimetres. And then fold it in half, and then fold it in half the other way. You want to take a pencil or a pen and just put a dot right in the centre so you can see that centre point clearly. And then I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to measure out from that dot 3/4 of an inch and place another dot. And 3/4 of an inch is about 1.9 centimetres. So now you've got 2 dots, one in the centre and one part way up one of the fold lines. I'm now going to place my 4-inch square into my wreath building template, and then I'm going to cover with my sheet of acetate. Now I'm doing this because it might take me several attempts to position my bee correctly, so I don't want to mess up my paper or have to make another piece. So if I stamp it on acetate, I can rub it out if I need to go again. Now I'm going to position the bottom of my stamp, not the bottom of the bee image, but the actual bottom edge of the stamp, the lowest point, just on that top dot, pencil dot. And I'm trying to get that crease line on the paper square to run through the centre of the bee's body. So I picked up my stamp, inked it up and stamped it down on the acetate, and by some miracle I got it right first time. If I hadn't, then I can clean the acetate, reposition my stamp and try again. Okay, so now I can test this bee's position on the copy paper. I don't want to go straight into my cardstock just in case it's not quite right. So I've stamped my first image and it looks good. Then I can rotate my paper and stamp the next one. I want to make sure that the wings are touching or overlapping slightly. And again, it looks fine. So I can do another one just to test, and that looks fine. And then I'm going to do one final one on the other side of that first bee. So I've rotated it backwards, and I'm just going to stamp that one last bee, and it all looks fine. So if these 4 are okay, chances are the other 4 would be too. So now I can remove the copy paper and insert my proper Whisper White 4-inch panel. Then I can ink up my stamp and stamp for real. Then I'll rotate my cardstock clockwise, ink up my stamp again and stamp it down. Each time you need to make sure that the template is in that top right corner and your paper is sitting nicely inside the template. And then you'll just repeat this until you've gone all the way around to create your circle. And that's it. That's the last one. I'm using my Daffodil blends again to do the colouring, starting with the light Daffodil Delight, and I'm colouring all the stripes. And then I'm going in with the dark and just adding a little on the start and end of each stripe, and then I'll blend again with the light. If you had a large circle die big enough to go around all these bees, you could die cut them into a circle. I haven't, so I'm going to cut around these by hand. I'm just leaving a very narrow border of white around the outside of the image. I'm now going to show you how I created this stitched scalloped square mat from the stitched So Sweetly dies, which are rectangular in shape. Now I used the largest one in the set. You need a piece of Coastal Cabana cardstock that is big enough to fit this die in both directions. Okay, because we're going to create a square from it. You also need to die cut a piece of copy paper using this die, and I'll use that as a template later. I'm going to do some partial die cutting. Now I use a Big Shot, and it's just a standard sandwich that I need to set up for thin dies. I've placed my cardstock onto my plate and I've positioned my die towards the front of that cardstock, and I'm just securing it with a little bit of washi tape. I'm now going to move the cardstock further towards the back end of that plate, and then I can balance the top plate on top of it. Now I'm not covering that back edge of the die, so therefore it will not cut into the cardstock when I run it through my Big Shot. So there's a tiny gap between the back end of the top plate and the back end of that die. Okay, and that's where I'm going to position my plate and run it through my die cutting machine. And then I can just remove the die, and you can see that I've cut 3 edges, but not that back edge. To finish cutting my square, I'm going to spin my cardstock around, so I've got the cut side towards me. Now I would suggest at this point you take a pencil and just mark on the sides, the left and right edges, how far up on that cardstock the scallops have already been cut. I'm lining up the copy paper die cut that I made on the bottom edge with the scallops that have already been cut into the cardstock. Okay, and I'm trying to get this as exact as I can. And I've then secured it with some washi tape. Now you want to repeat this on the top edge with the top of the die. So line up the scallops so they match exactly. And once you've done that, look at the side edges and again line up the scallops with those that have already been cut. And once you're happy, just secure with washi tape. And then you want to take your top plate and you want to position the back edge where you've made your pencil marks on the side, just past it. Okay, so it won't recut, or it won't try and recut the scallops that you've already cut. And then once you're happy, you can run it through your die cutting machine. Before you remove the die, just flip it over and check all around the back to make sure the whole square has been cut through. If it hasn't, you may want to move the die towards you a little bit and recut it. Mine was fine, apart from that top right corner. I don't know why that didn't cut. Right, I can now start building this card. Now for my original card, I use a 12-inch by 6-inch piece of Coastal Cabana, and I scored it at 6 inches and folded it to create my base card. But that was the last piece of 12-inch cardstock I had in this colour. So I'm going to make a card base from 2 pieces this time. I have a 6 by 6-inch piece and then a 6.5-inch by 6-inch piece. And on the 6.5-inch edge, I've scored it at 6 inches, and that's where I'm going to join these two together. For the front of the card, I have a basic black mat, and then I have a mat made from the Golden Honey designer series paper. Then I have the square scallop mat that I've just created and another square of the same paper. And then for the inside of my card I have another basic black square mat, and I have my inside panel that we stamped earlier. And I also have a tiny strip of the same designer series paper. And that's it. My card is now complete. And here's another look at my original one, more or less identical. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Bye for now.